Welcome to Non-Obvious with Hugh Hansen.
And welcome, Annsley, to this podcast. So how long have actually we known each other? Do you have any idea about that?
I was thinking about that question, and I think we met in 2012. It was the first time I went to the Fordham IP conference. I was a junior associate at Allen & Overy at the time, and who have been sponsors for a while. And Jeremy Phillips also was encouraging me for years before that to go to the Fordham IP conference. So that was the first year I went. And that's, I think, the first year I met you. So it's been a while.
Yeah. How's Jeremy doing? Do you stay in touch with him?
Sporadically. When he said he was going to retire from the IPKat, he really did mean it. He did decide that's it. I've done my dedication to IP. I'm gonna go and do different things and spend time with my family. So there's many of us who either get to see him or still communicate with him, but he's very happy doing his kind of next chapter of life. We spoke to him probably more during the transition after he left the IPKat blog, just to make sure that we were on the right track. Or he's always open to get an email from any of us if we ever have a question.
Wow.
But it's quite amazing to think such a strong presence in IP is it has a life after IP.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about lawyers, one is they're the last to give up their careers. If you look in the United States, I have, colleagues from college and they're long retired. And then I look at the ones who are lawyers or academics, and they're not retired. There's something about the law. The law is a jealous mistress, they used to say, because it attracts you actually more than family life and everything else. Those days are gone, thank goodness. But there's something about, I don't know, the intellectual component of the law that seems to keep people going. And I think is probably a good thing. That's why I was so surprised by his retirement, because, and pretty young, relatively speaking, for these things. And he's very good, very interesting. And I thought it was quite a loss, but you guys have followed in and done a wonderful job at IPKat. Would you say your main function, what is your main function, if there is one? IPKat, law, saving the world in these various organizations you're in. So if you had to say, someone doing a biography and they said, well, what was the main thing you did in these years? Was there a main thing, or did you do it all? All right, what was the main thing?
If Annsley was expressed as a function, it would be making things better, I think. And that's kind of a broad statement, but it encapsulates everything that I try to do in a lot of aspects of my life, which is, from the kind of legal litigation practice, I do want to make the law better, or I want to make it clearer. I want to make it more certain. I want to make it fairer. From the IPKat perspective, I want to make our industry and our profession better in the sense that we're exchanging ideas and we're debating with each other and we're giving information out. And with my extracurriculars, I do a lot of diversity work. I want to make the profession better for everyone, women, men, however they identify coming into our profession. So I also want to make the better pasta when I when I make food. I always trying to strive to make things a bit better, no matter what it is. Some people might say that's a bit idealistic, and I think I probably am idealistic, but I always want to just to leave things a bit better than when I left them.
Well, that's great. That's great. So you're going to leave Non-Obvious with Hugh Hansen better than when you came?
Without a doubt. Without a
Okay.
doubt. I will.
Yes.
This, as I said, this is my nice little segue into my weekend. It will just set the tone just right.
Oh, I have a whole list of questions here, but what do you normally, do you just enjoy life on the weekend, or is that just an extension of the week?
Um, and well, it depends what's happened in the week. I think as many litigators will attest to, sometimes your weekends are not your own because you have deadlines the following week. So the weekends kind of do not exist. I think of as I've gotten older, I have tried to carve out that time, that kind of just distinguishing feature between weekday and weekend. As a more junior lawyer and as someone who is so hungry to, establish oneself in the profession, I was spending most of my weekends doing IPKat, 6, 7, 8 hours, Saturday and Sunday. And I don't have that in me anymore to do that kind of at that level. So because I am starting to recognize the importance of having a little bit of a break. Otherwise you kind of lose touch of who you are. You're just otherwise a machine for, churning through work or churning through posts or whatever. So I do try to carve that time out.
Okay. All right. Now let me, where were you born?
Um, this whole story, I think, will take up half of your podcast because I've been everywhere. I was born in Las Cruces, New Mexico, about 45 minutes from the border of Mexico, New Mexico.
And why were you born there?
So my parents, who are from Northern California, they are both academics. And as I'm sure many of your listeners who are academics will appreciate, you generally go where the positions are and where the interesting work is. And my parents went from California, they met in Nevada, they spent time in Northern Colorado, and then they ended up at NMSU in Las Cruces. And
Ended up where?
that's where I was born. And NMSU, New Mexico State University in Las Cruces.
Yeah, don't
so
use,
that's
hold it. Abbreviations, acronyms, no, because we have a lot of people
okay.
who don't know any of this. So then you are permitted to go back to the acronym or go to the once you, okay.
Okay,
All right.
fair enough.
So, okay. So how long were you there?
I was there, I think, until I was about 6 or 7. And then we again moved for an academic job and we went to Omaha. My mother got a position at University of Nebraska, Omaha. And my dad was visiting there as well, but was going back between New Mexico and Nebraska. So that's when I started kind of alive to the world where you could work in multiple places. And that has definitely informed, my desire to work and study and learn, not just based in London, but also the US and other parts of the world. So that was the first entree to the kind of nomadic life of an academic, which has informed
so how long were you in
life as a lawyer.
How long were you in Omaha?
We were there for 5 years. And I should say there was a period of time when we were in New Mexico that my dad took a sabbatical in the United Kingdom. And that was when I was a baby. That was when I was 18 months old. And again, academic nomadic parents. So we flew to the UK and we lived in the UK for a while and then came back. Then we were in Nebraska. And then from Nebraska, we were there for 5 years. And then my mom decided to take me. My sister was already at college at this point to the UK, and she had a position at a university in Newcastle. So again, here I am as a child of academics moving
how old were you when
a different country.
How old were you when you went to Newcastle?
Well, first time when I was 18 months old, when I was for my dad's sabbatical, and then later I think I was how old would I have been? 11 or 12.
So you've been And then since then, you've been mostly in the UK?
So I was there in Newcastle for about five years or so. But in between that, we did a little bit of time in Texas, again, academic position there. And then after I did ostensibly high school in the UK, I went back to New Mexico and I started studying chemical engineering at the University of New Mexico, where my dad was department chair of engineering. So, and I was there for a couple years before my mother, in her utmost wisdom, said, yeah, we know that you like science and technology, but you also love music and art. And actually, intellectual property has everything. So why don't you stop what you're doing and go to law school in the UK, which helps because it's cheaper to go to law school in the UK as opposed to the US. And then I went back to the UK. So it's a very complicated story going back and forth and back and forth. But ultimately, as soon as I decided to study law, I've been in the UK ever since.
So you went to the University of Bristol.
Correct.
How was that?
It was a culture shock for me. I'd already done, the first few years of university already, and I'd already been with people a lot older than me. I had spent a academic career where I had skipped grades up and down throughout that time, and I had been 2 years ahead by the point that I went to Bristol. And so I was now back with my actual age group, which was a little bit of a strange culture shock because they were just starting out with a university experience and away from parents. And there's definitely a very strong drinking culture in the UK as opposed to some parts of the US, at least. So it was a little bit of like I was just kind of out of sorts because I was like,
Well,
I've never been with my age group.
One thing is you thought you were much more mature than them, correct?
Yeah.
You probably
yeah,
were.
I would think so. Yes, and I was trying to like assimilate to the culture and try to make friends, but a lot of that consisted of over getting really, really drunk and then trying to piece it together the next morning. And that was just not really a speed I was used to. I've had to kind of modulate how I navigate that since I've been in the UK. But that was really a surprise to me. And the other thing that was a surprise to me is that how infrequent my interactions with professors were. I was coming from a American university system where, my days were full of classes, lectures, and labs, and, office hours and everything. And in the UK university system, in law at least, it's not like this in the sciences, but you maybe had 6 or 7 contact hours a week. And then everything else you were just teaching yourself. And so that was really odd for me. I felt like I was doing a lot of the kind of studying myself. So it was definitely a culture shock in that aspect as well.
Well, which system was better for learning?
For me, I think the American system is better for learning. I think this as well because in the UK system, you start picking in high school, you start picking the courses that you want to study. So you start with a kind of a wide number of classes, and then you narrow down. So by the time you're in for example, your senior year of high school, to use the American nomenclature, you're maybe studying 3 subjects. And I think it's really, ridiculous that at the age of, 16 or before, you're saying, oh, I'm not going to do math anymore, or I'm not going to do history or the arts anymore. I mean, what does a 16-year-old know at that point? I mean, no offense to my 16-year-old self, but I didn't know. For me to, I was put in that position to pick which subjects. And I was picking really random subjects, the doctors already identified themselves at 16. So, I'm doing chemistry and biology and math. And then the, liberal arts people were just doing history and English literature, et cetera. but you never know. You never know what your passion's going to be or where things are going to lie. Whereas in the American system, you have to keep even the first two, 2.5 years of university, you have to do subjects. You have to continue to do math, continue to do French, et cetera, and then make a decision. So I think that grounding is better. Um, and it's also, we see this a lot more now, the system of education in the UK has become so bureaucratic and so test driven that it's always culminating to the final test. At the end of the year, everything that you've done, you're gauged on that. Whereas in the American system, you have these checkpoints throughout, the academic year to test how you're doing. And we saw how that system doesn't work very well. And as a result of the pandemic, where these students weren't able to take their final year exams because of social distancing and stay-at-home orders, and all that they could do is just kind of guess by what the teachers kind of felt the capabilities of their students were throughout the year, but they didn't have pop quizzes or essays or homework or midterms to give them a fairer kind of reflection. So I think we saw a little bit of the kind of the flaws in the system. And I'm sure there's many people who will object to everything I've said, but having experienced both systems, I think there's a lot to be said for the grounding of an American education.
Did you ever want to teach yourself?
Yeah, I guess my my mom always keeps kind of chiming in every now and again, being like, well, why don't you just go to university and teach? You could be really good at it. My sister's a teacher as well. Both my parents obviously are academics and are teachers. I really love it. And I think that's what I really enjoyed about IPKat, is that I felt that the writing was almost kind of teaching people who may not be familiar with the jurisdiction or the type of law or the industry what's going on. And so that has given me an outlet. And I continue to teach on my job with, junior lawyers that are coming up within my team. But that's something I'll definitely consider at some point if I ever transition out of private practice, that is something I would really like to do, because you get so much out of it and you learn so much yourself from that process, which it would make my mom really happy. She'd be like, finally, we got you.
So where are your parents now?
Right now, they're up in Massachusetts with my sister and her family, but normally they're in New York.
Oh, so did you ever spend any time in New York?
A lot of time. So my dad has been there. So while we were finishing up, my mother was finishing up her position in the UK. He moved to New York for a position there at Manhattan College, and where he's the dean of engineering. So he's been there for about 10 years, over 10 years. So whenever I was going back to the US, I always flew to New York, and going to Fordham IP gave me a brilliant excuse to stay with them and see them. And I really love New York. I really miss New York. Just even looking at pictures of New York right now makes me sad, because just the energy and the people, and it's just so exciting. And I think that when I finally managed to get home and go to JFK and go through immigration and they say, welcome home, I'm probably going to, start tearing up, because it is just one of the best places in the world.
Okay. Okay. When did you decide to become a lawyer?
Well, my mother decided that I was going to become a lawyer when I was doing my chemical engineering degree at the University of New Mexico, and that I was doing that because I wanted to become a doctor, because I thought that was the path for me. I really struggled to try to figure out what I wanted to do, because I really loved science and I loved the arts and I loved dance and I loved music, but I loved chemistry and I liked meteorology. And I was still even struggling with that during that time. And she said, IP will have everything you want, because you don't have to really specialize. You can learn about everything. And so I kind of just went on that path. And it was spurred at the time. This is 2001, 2002, by the Napster file sharing litigation. And as a big lover of music, and music has been such a huge part of my life. My parents were children of, the 60s in Northern California. So we had, the Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin, growing up, just blaring in the car stereo or on the vinyl records. So music has been a huge part of our family. And so, subscribers to Rolling Stone, and I'd be reading the Rolling Stone articles about this copyright litigation brought by the RIAA. And I was really just struck by the fact that we had a litigation response. I mean, at the time, I couldn't put this as articulately, but now I can. A litigation response to a demand from consumers that the business wasn't fulfilling. And instead of providing that business solution, i.e. streaming or on-demand access to digital music online, the response was to sue whoever was the ISP holder, or whoever, even if the person wasn't the one responsible for it, if it was the grandma, sue the grandma because her grandson was using the computer. And I just thought, this is mad. But that got me the initial introduction to how intellectual property intersects with developments in technology and business models and how people consume the arts, and how things change. And I thought, well, this is really fascinating. And so that did, I can blame my mom as much as I want as to pushing me into IP law. But at the same time, I was thinking, what on earth? This is really interesting. And so that,
and how old were you then?
Spurred me to only focus. I was 18. So
Okay.
I started university when I was 16. So I was only 18.
16. So you
Yes.
must be a genius. Or is that
no, absolutely not. I really liked school, and it's a credit to my parents that they made education and learning so part and intrinsic as to our upbringing. So,
all right. So we're actually getting out of the background thing, but how did you end up at UCL?
So after my
University College London, I have to myself not use these things. Yes. Yes. Okay.
I finished. So 3 years at Bristol. And throughout the time, I knew by the third year I was going to do the intellectual property course. I just knew I wasn't interested in the corporate world or transactional. It was only IP always. And then after that, I really struggled to get a training contract. And there was some law at the time, which has now been overturned thanks to challenges in the court system, where it was really hard as a foreigner, a non-UK citizen, to get training contracts or employed by a firm, unless you were like super, super incredible, genius, amazingness, which obviously I was not. So it was really hard for me to get employed as a foreigner. And, there was acknowledgement from even various universities we spoke to that said, yeah, we know that this is a problem, but, we want to attract foreign students because foreign students have to pay more money in tuition wise. And so, this was a bit of an outrage. It's not like that anymore because there's been challenges to it. So you cannot discriminate on the basis of nationality for jobs. But at my time, it was very difficult. And so I thought, well, what is going to distinguish me? And my mom, and again, my parents are all about higher ed. So they said, let's do a master's course. And so the master's course that was going at the time that was just, above them all was the one at University College London, UCL. And it was the first year that the late Sir Hugh Laddie, who had left the bench the year previous, was leading that master's degree program. And it was the first year of the Institute of Brand and Innovation Law, IBL, the first cohort of LMs with a specialism in IP students at UCL.
And did you get to know Hugh at all in that?
Yes, yes, we did. We didn't at the start. We didn't see him that much. We didn't know at the time that he was tragically suffering from cancer. But he started to attend more and more lectures. He was actually my advisor for my thesis, um, and it was so amazing to watch him kind of delve into a subject where, we're coming from, undergraduate, where we don't have that much practical experience. We read decisions and we try to figure out what the court has said, but we have no idea, or at least, at the time I went to school, how that case got to the court. We don't know that there was a claim form, and we don't know that the parties are instructing solicitors and they're arguing with each other. So we didn't have that practical context as to why certain things are being argued or not argued. And he put that into context and brought it all to life in a way that just made the subject so interesting. And I recorded all his lectures, and I still have them somewhere because they were so amazing, particularly in patent law, on commercialization of IP. And he brought everyone in. We were taught by other judges from other jurisdictions and from the leading barristers. It was really fabulous, and I remember the first one-on-one meeting I had with him when we were talking about what my master's thesis was going to be on, and I gave him kind of an array of topics, and just one by one he was like, nope, 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 without really any justification. And then he finally landed on one. He said, do that, that's interesting, no one's done it, kind of no discussion. And it was on copyright and orphan works. And he just knew kind of what had been done before, what was going to be interesting, and he said, you're doing that. And that I was very happy to do that topic. That was a really interesting topic at the time.
Hugh was a little bit of a rebel by judges' standards and lawyer standards. So it was interesting that you got to spend some time with him. He was a wonderful person, and I got to know him. We had some differences of opinion on IP law, but he was a great guy.
No, he really was, and he was so generous with his time with the students. And you could really see that he really enjoyed kind of seeing the spark of interest that he could kind of get from students. I think I have also within my notes all the kind of Hugh quotes, because there was tons of amazing quotes that he would spurn off about various judges and what he really thought about a decision, or what he really thought about the parties' arguments, which I'll have to dig out sometime. But it was just nice to hear a case that before was really kind of boring to read on the paper just come to life because of the personalities involved, and Hugh did that.
Yeah, and that was unusual, that style of teaching anywhere, especially, but also in the UK, London. All right. Have you ever thought that maybe you'd go back to the United States to work or anything else?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the motivation for being at a firm like WilmerHale now is because of the US connection. I mean, besides all the other amazing attributes, is because I've always wanted to do more of a transatlantic practice between UK and US. And a lot of our cases already have that element anyway. Almost all of our cases have a European US dimension to it. And I don't think I'll ever not be part of the UK ecosystem and part of the legal profession and practicing here, but I do want to do more in terms of the exchange between the two, because I miss home as well. And, I miss my family, and I miss my people. So I definitely I am looking to that in terms of future planning.
All right, so you've seen, okay, just let's look at Europe. What, is there any strong differences in approach to IP in the UK as opposed to France, as opposed to Brussels, as opposed to Spain? You know, it's supposed to be all the same, but of course, it's difficult when they had different cultures and then you're trying to bring those together. Have you noticed anything today that if this case was brought here, you'd probably have a different result than if it was brought here? Or is it becoming more harmonized?
Um, I think it's becoming more harmonized. I think that is a lot in credit to the fact that the judges are talking to each other a lot more about cases that they're involved in, whether it's the same parallel case or whether it's a similar issue in a related case. They are noticing what each other are doing in judgments, how they're addressing issues, and where they choose to, decide to decide a case in a way that's maybe inconsistent with the conclusion. They will, often but not always say, I've read the Dutch decision and they came into a different view than I have, but I have the benefit of cross-examination of expert witnesses, for example, over a course of 3 days or whatever. So they're more sensitive to that, and I think sensitive and not, just issuing a decision that's completely out of the field without having at least a regard as to what else is going on. And we've had to depend on them a lot. The UPC, Unified Patent Court, was meant to, kind of almost codify that exchange and to harmonize, at least from the patent profession, these types of issues. But even without that, I think that, the benefit of the judges in the European system just communicating with each other has lent to a good degree of harmonization. But I think where the differences really do start to come in is that procedural law, where there is, a complete lack of harmonization across all, Europe. And the European Commission has always had a really difficult time in establishing directives or regulations on substantive law, where actually some of the treatment of IP issues comes down to procedural issues such as availability of evidence, treatment of confidential information proceedings, things that are, more civil procedural in nature. So I think that's where a lot of the differences in how IP is litigated still remain.
So in terms of your client, then you're taking that into account as to where to sue, or yes?
Yes, absolutely. Always depends first, what is the client's objective? Do they want a quick and fast win? Do they want a quick injunction? Go to Germany. Do they want, a judgment that might have some benefit in being exported, that will have a specialist judge looking at the issues? Go to the UK. Do you want pre-action disclosure that you might be able to use in different jurisdictions if you get the permission from the court? Go to the UK. So there's various tools, substantive and procedural, that are available in jurisdictions across Europe, in which I include the UK in that definition, that can really, enter into how your overall strategic planning in terms of, I'm going to issue in the Netherlands on day one. And then given that I know how long those proceedings are going to take, am I going to get a Dutch decision here that will impact on negotiation to try to reach settlement? But at the same time, I'm going to increase leverage. So I'm going to issue in the UK on day 22. You do all that kind of mapping to figure out, how best to use the procedural tools and substantive tools to your advantage to try to hopefully reach a great settlement, or reach whatever commercial objective your client wants to get. That's the goal of lawyers now, is to really know not what's going on at your own nose in your own borders, but what else is going on next door in France or Germany.
Interesting. Now, that was a very sophisticated examination. How many lawyers do you think go through that? Or are you among the few that actually would go through all that analysis before bringing a case?
for marketing purposes, I would like to say I'm one of the few, and therefore you should you should instruct me. But I would say that, if you're a good lawyer, if you're a good global IP litigator, you are doing that all the time. You cannot just be, I'm a US lawyer, I'm a French lawyer. You have to be wider than that. I don't know if all lawyers are as interested in looking at the procedural issues of litigating in Germany, for example. But there are organizations that like AIPPI, that is an acronym. It's the Association for the Protection of Intellectual Property, that look at these kind of comparative issues. And so there is that organization, all the people who are members of it love it so much they want to know about what's going on in other countries. But I would really, yeah, but I don't know. Maybe this is a question, if I can ask the question of you, Hugh, how many US lawyers are that au fait with European substantive law and procedure? I think in Europe, we're a little bit more aware because we're kind of close to each other, but I don't know if that's just,
I think very few.
European.
I think very few. I think actually one of the problems even now, and this is what I try to emphasize in my classes, is you have a problem, what's the best way to solve it and where? And a lot of lawyers just want to bring it where their office is. One is it guarantees they're going to keep the case, but you would keep it. And I tell them, okay, you're telling the client, this is actually, we could bring this here. It'd be better for us. Don't worry about supervising. I'll supervise. We'll get a local counsel. We'll do all this, but your chances of success are this. Yeah, so I actually think an international, I'm talking about even domestic, when you're trying to think of venues, like for instance, Oracle brought its case in the Northern District of California. They might as well take a gun and shoot themselves in the head. The worst possible place to bring that case. One of the best would be the Central District of California, Southern District of New York. But that's where the lawyers were, and that's where the company was. And they just said, okay. So there's an example of even at the highest levels, they're not thinking, in my view anyway, enough of these situations. And then if you're talking about Europe, I started this IP conference.
I think I've heard of it.
28 years ago. And it was kept up in the beginning, not by US. I had a dean who was very supportive, and but I can't really give you much money. In fact, this or that, and I'll loan you some money, this or that, because the chance of it surviving, because of a lot of international, and his view that no one's going to want that. And so in the beginning, actually, it was kept alive by people from the UK and others, lawyers, who wanted it and supported it and everything else. And then gradually, but even to this day, there are, copyright lawyers in the United States who have never been to the conference. So it's you can make a very good living in the United States without thinking about Europe or and unfortunately not even thinking about other venues in the United States. But so I think it's one of the things I've really felt good about my career is I've gotten to know all these things, and actually when I do consulting, I can just some of the things you're talking about. I can do that and be of use to people. But anyway, let's get back to you. What is your favorite conference and your favorite person in IP in the whole world? I mean, this is a neutral question. No, never mind.
Obviously.
I know the answer. You don't even have to say it.
Okay, good. I'm glad. It goes without being said.
Yes, I think so. Okay, what is, in terms of your practice, which is mostly European, how often do you think about, okay, what's the implications in the United States of all this?
Every day, every day at the moment, anyway. And it has been like that for many years. I remember, I'm not as well seasoned as many of your other guests, but even I've been practicing for you know over 10 years. But even at the start of that, the perception was US is a huge market. We do what we do here. Europe is an afterthought. But yet, everything that we did in Europe, we always had to think, how is this going to affect the US? But we never really felt that whatever happens in the US, people there were really thinking about how that was going to impact litigation in Europe. So we, at least, speaking on my behalf, I've always had a thought as to how something's going to play in US litigation, because often the UK cases or the German cases were going to get a decision before a US case. Generally, if things were started the same day, depending, what kind of rocket docket you might be in the US or not, you can generally get a decision quicker in some jurisdictions. So I've always thought about that. I think it's only been recently.
Just hold on a second.
Yeah.
Where do you get the decision quicker, Europe or the US?
Assuming things are started on day one at the same time, you can get a decision generally quicker in the UK or in Germany in particular. Germany's a lot quicker. That is subject to there, for example, being some really speedy dockets in some places in the US where the judges are really trying to get things going. So we've always had to think about how our decisions might be used or impact the litigation in the US. It's only been recently that I think that the US litigators are more conscious as to whatever they do here, even if it's just motion practice. Whatever they do in the US might have an impact in how things are being argued in the UK. And you are seeing the kind of permutation of things that have been brought up in the US impacting us more or being raised more in European litigation. So
I find that what?
I think I'm finding that in the last few years, U.S. lawyers are really understanding that we have to be on the same page.
Are you speaking about patent lawyers or all IP lawyers?
I think all IP lawyers. I think it comes up more in patent litigation because there's more parallel litigation. I'm trying to think of an example where there's been a parallel copyright case in recent years that has gotten to the stage of a trial. But I think definitely all IP. You can't not, because your businesses, your clients are operating globally. So you cannot think that one decision in the US is not going to impact them somehow in Europe.
Okay, Brexit. What effect will that have on practices, do you think? Or is it already having an anticipation? I mean, it hasn't actually, there's a destination date of when all this is going to happen. Has it already happened or not with Brexit?
Well, we're gone. We're no longer a member of the European Union. There are various kind of checkpoints as to when we need to do certain things. To be honest, I think with everyone else, I have Brexit fatigue. It's been such a mess that it's kind of hard to figure out what else we haven't done that we should have done in the many years before this, with how many millions of pounds spent on bus stop advertising about we're getting ready for Brexit. But in terms of the impact on the profession, I think too early to tell. I think the UK IP litigation market will, I think, always be pretty strong. We've always been kind of the central hub for a lot of, coordination pieces, strategy work, because we speak English. We are part of a common law system. We're in a time zone that's really nice that we can deal with, West Coast or with Asia. So we've always been kind of an attractive kind of go-to shop for clients who want to, people that know a lot about different jurisdictions to help them with their global strategy work. So I think there will always be a market for that. The impact will be if the Unified Patent Court ever gets up and running, what that will do, because with the UK not participating in that anymore. So there are questions about patent litigation practices and UK only patent boutiques that don't have kind of an office in Europe, so they don't have a hedge in their business model to alleviate that. But that's something that we're going to be seeing in 15, 20, 30 years. I don't see that being an immediate impact. I mean, the immediate impact for us in IP is issues of, border control and our clients having issues with getting their products in and out, and the tax and tariffs and increased burden of all that. The business of IP is having more of an impact than I would say the practice. And, if I could just add one more thing, which is, our judges have always been very commercial as to, making sure that our courts and our practices are fit for purpose in a commercial age to attract litigants. And we've seen that in recent decisions. Unwire Planet is very much a decision, not to go into nuances on that, a decision that attracts litigants to our market, and we've seen other cases that have done that. So I don't think the impact on our profession will be too great in the immediate future, but I think we will see some impact moving on.
Well, do you think actually your Supreme Court did that purposely to attract business after Brexit?
A cynical person might say that, and whether I'm a cynical person or not, you'll all have to judge for yourself. But it definitely had the effect. I read some article in one of the IP magazines recently that somebody said, "Oh, we haven't seen a major uptick," and I definitely disagree with that. If you look at the number of cases in the FRAN SUV space that are being issued in the UK. If you can come to a one-stop shop and get a global license, why wouldn't you? It's great for business. Is it the best solution, and is it creating friends in other jurisdictions across the world? No, but it's what we have right now. So I guess we have to thank them for that impact, I guess.
All right, this isn't one interesting thing I've found is. The whole system, the common law system, we were based on a common law system because I can't say you guys, because you claim actually still some American aspects to it. But then you have the civil system, no precedents, this, and the opinions are this long, just facts result. But what I think now is happening, and this is because what works. Basically, serious jurisdictions, whether they say it or not, are common law countries now. They're looking at precedents, they're looking at policy, they're making decisions. They're not calling it that, but that's it. So if you're going to do international litigation, you have to be aware that you have to convince people it's the right thing. It's not just that there's some doctrine to do it, especially now when gazillion people are affected by these. So they have to think about what's good as opposed to just what the doctrine says. So it's an interesting, I think that anyway is a fairly interesting development. Okay. Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Apparently, I'm a big fan of hers, and apparently you are as well.
Huge fan.
Oh.
Very sad as well. It was the news when of her death last year was one of those things that I wasn't sleeping very well that night, but then I noticed my phone was blowing up, and from all over the world, men and women were just, all my friends were and colleagues just couldn't believe it. And that was testament to the fact of such a huge presence in the legal profession, for one, but also her using her voice and her intellect to make things better. And she just took that fight to such a elevated place of argument and passion and kind of succinct advocacy that she made such a huge difference in all of her decisions and her dissents, that it felt like she was fighting on behalf of us all. And so when you lose a figure like that, especially for me as a woman in the profession, it felt like we lost somebody who had been protecting us and kind of fending off kind of the evil that can happen in any society. So I mean, I am a huge fan, and her loss is definitely felt every day. But what I think it did was, in a sense, what she did was instilled in us already, but her passing kind of awakened in us that fight that she already had and that she'd been waging for so long. And so I think I just feel like a lot of us have more voice and more agency to kind of continue on her legacy. So although the loss is great, it's the space is there that we're taking the baton from her. Yeah, I don't think I'll see another person like her in my lifetime.
Yeah.
She was, truly spectacular.
Yeah, she's was an amazing person and had a fantastic effect. She was, which is, you can be an amazing person and have relatively little effect, but she was an amazing person and had a lot of effect. Yeah, it's a big loss. So I'm coming out of law school now in the US. Is there any reason why I should go over to Europe and try to get an advanced degree or practice there? I mean, I understand some people have done that. Now, another way of saying that is, would you change anything in the way your last 10, 15 years or whatever?
No, I wouldn't. There's nothing I would change. It wasn't always the easiest because I'm still an American in a foreign country, in a very special foreign country like the UK. So it wasn't always the easiest, but the opportunity to learn not just about the UK, but our neighboring continental European systems has been profound. And that is something that we discussed earlier that has been missing from either domestic or either kind of an international practice perspective from the US. So, but is now increasingly important, increasingly demanded by clients. So I would say to those leaving the US law schools to consider looking further afield than the US market. If that's what they want. There's some people that want to stay local, or they would just want to do, certain areas of law, and that's great. But if you want a career in IP, you have to be global and you have to be international now. I don't see how you can serve your clients without that element. And you need to get really practical hands-on experience. There's nothing to say that you shouldn't go to the UK or go to France if you know the language, or somewhere else.
Hold. You were sounding reasonable for a while. Go to France?
Well, why not? Why not? If you know the language, I know people who've done it. I know American lawyers who've gone and spend a year or two in France practicing as a foreign lawyer. So why not?
Yeah, they probably were, that's because they had a girlfriend or boyfriend in France, if I had to guess. No, I think it's interesting, but I think France is one of your more insular, I think, countries, because it's culturally different. And especially in IP, they look at different ways of why you should have IP. And one was, they started out as very bright people and do things. It's part of their personality. We have to protect that. I love going to Paris. I walk along the Seine and I feel like I'm in love or should be in love or something like that. And and I had interactions with some French people that were very good. But so I'm thinking, and I haven't done this yet, is in this period of after the pandemic and everyone's this to this to this to this, actually just go over to the UK and go to UCL or whatever for a year and come back. But that year, you're going to absorb an incredible amount of stuff about what's going on there, much more than if you just spent a year of practice there. So
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I fully support anyone doing a master's in law, especially master's of law in a different country. That was probably the single most important year of my academic career. And, in terms of what you absorb from, the actual jurisdiction in which you are in, but, those classes, I did comparative everything, comparative copyright, comparative trademark, there's comparative competition law, where you look at, the laws of France and why we're so different from our conception of intellectual property and what's it there to do. But those are so important. Those are so important. And even now, as a practicing lawyer, when we have to deal with issues of foreign law in our cases, I find it can sometimes, you can tell people who've studied French law at, a master's or undergraduate level, because they kind of understand how a French lawyer would see things or how a Spanish lawyer would see things, and how that might just be different from how an English lawyer might perceive things, and how, yeah. I was just using the word might sarcastically. Well, definitely we'll see things differently, and how we need to communicate that to a judge as to why it's different. And if you don't have that language, and all law is a language, law is a language, but UK law is a specific language, French law is a specific language. You don't have exposure to that language, it's very hard to understand what the differences are or where the similarities lay, and how to convince a judge, why it's important. And wholly agree with you, Hugh. A year at UCL doing your master's in intellectual property law or whatever, that is definitely not a wasted year. It will serve you in good stead.
Good. You mentioned this AIPPI, International Association for the Protection of Intellectual Property. Was it based in Switzerland? What is the base for that organization?
It's in Switzerland. It is the best way I describe it to people who don't know about it is that it's essentially a model UN for intellectual property. So it's organized by national groups or regional groups, national groups, and each year they will set 4 questions. And there'll be one on patents, one on trademarks, one on copyright, and then like a free-for-all. And these questions, and it's a long list of questions, like, for example, how is copyright liability in the context of ISPs dealt with in your country? And they have a list of questions, and every national group has to answer it on the basis of their law. And then some poor person has to look at all of these submissions and figure out, okay, where are the commonalities between the approach under French or German or US or Canadian law, and what is the resolution that we could draft that everyone can vote on and agree. And then you go to the Congress, and there you are, like a model UN. You have I go for on behalf of the UK group, we sit at a table that have UK flags. Behind us are the Americans with their US flags, always very enjoyable and raucous behind us. There's always some scheming and dealings going on between different countries. Usually you have the Japanese and the Germans talking to each other because they have similar legal systems. It is so much fun and actually really enjoyable. But we're all so passionate about IP that we want to know about each other's treatments of different issues of IP in order to get to a common understanding of what can we all agree on? What is the best way to harmonize or to align our positions on IP? And then you vote, or you have major arguments between different national groups, and then you get a resolution. So we were talking about before, who are the people that know a lot about the laws or procedural issues in Belgium? It'll be somebody at AIPPI, because we will have argued on that point at some point or read their papers. So if anyone's interested in international kind of comparative IP, that's the place to look.
How come I've heard so little about them? If they're this dynamic, I would have think in all my travels and everything else, is it more academic in the sense that it's interesting when I do this, but how do they have, or do they have an effect on what people do in Europe in terms of or the US in terms of the law? Very few organizations would have an effect, but are they going for what is the perfect thing idealistically, or are they going for what can work in reality?
I think where would they end up, because the people that are showing up for the most part are in-house or practitioners, so they know kind of what's realistic as to what could be achieved. The outcome of the resolutions, are used as a tool, and it's I can only speak from the UK perspective, that if there is legislative reform going on, if the UK IPO is looking at specific issues related to a topic that maybe AIPPI has discussed, we will say, hey, you should look at this, because it was a survey of all the countries, and they all agreed that at the very minimum, the law should be this. So if you're looking at legislative reform, you need to keep that in mind, because we don't want to be, a tiny island in the middle of nowhere taking a completely random approach.
How do you get access to this? I think that you have to be a member of the organization to get
You
access.
have to be a member. How it works, you're a member of you're a member of the organization, but you're a member of the national group. So you'd be a member of, for example, the US group.
And what then we do stuff in the US, and then
so it's just like you're getting ready for a United Nations meeting. You get your topic that you're going to have to debate with all the other countries. You figure out what the US position is, and you go in and you fight it to the death.
Annsley, you couldn't have used a worse analogy, because the UN is considered irrelevant to most people now, not in the past. All right, so what does it cost to join this organization?
It depends. It's set by the national groups, and depends how fiscally conservative or not they are as to how much they charge.
Well, what's a ballpark figure?
Well, if for in the UK, I mean, if they do it like under 35s, I think it's like, I'm going to get fired by somebody at AIPPI for this. I think maybe like 40 pounds or something.
Oh, it's nothing.
Pounds. It's not very much.
It's peanuts. Yeah.
No, it's not like thousands. No, everything's like under 100 for at least us. It's under 100 pounds. But
and how many people are in this?
I don't know what it is.
How many people do you think are in this organization? Members of the organization. I
really wish I would have studied
You should have done a little bit of homework before you came here.
Well, I didn't know this was coming up. Thousands.
Okay.
So when we have congresses, we have an annual congress each year. There'll be, sometimes 5,000 people showing up.
And where is that?
If it's in a great,
is that
all over the world. So before the pandemic, we had one in London, and then last year we were meant to have one in China. But next year, 2022, will be in San Francisco, I believe. So you'll have to come.
So you're screwing over China.
I think it's notionally kind of an online Chinese.
So
event,
you had it. Okay. So
yeah,
you had it.
I
so you had the event.
Yes. I didn't go, but I was in trial. But yeah,
okay.
It's all over the world.
All right. In terms of your own practice, is it mostly motion practice? Is it mostly talking to clients? Is it actually you're in a court arguing, or it's all above, or what?
All of the above. As a solicitor, I don't do any advocacy on my feet in court unless I have special permission from the judge. We have the barristers do that. And although I would very much like to be on my feet more arguing various things, but it's a mixture of all of that. We do a lot of interim applications, or motion practice. I do a huge amount of strategy coordination with various jurisdictions, client management, business development, everything. I think, as increasingly so for the next generation of lawyers coming in, where before I think you could have maybe gotten away with, just being a really great trial advocate or a really great, churner of work, or a really great winner, breadwinner, or a rainmaker. You have to be good at everything. And I think it's expecting a lot from one person, but you have to be able to do everything increasingly.
Are you the best lawyer you've ever met?
Absolutely not. That I ever met? No, not even that I ever met. I mean, obviously there's, Justice Ginsburg was probably the best lawyer
I was thinking, I'm not sure that she would be as effective as an in-practice lawyer as opposed to an academic and judge and everything else. But you, it would seem to me it'd be pretty hard to find someone better than you. And that's
I will.
That's $50.
I will put that on my directory quote if I can. If I can, you. No, there's so many talented people, but I think this next generation of lawyers are having to do everything that all at once. They have to be great at marketing. They have to be great at training. They have to be all this, that, and the other. So there's real stiff competition for that. But I thank you for the compliment. I have many flaws, I assure you.
Okay. By the way, when did we start this? Did you look at the time?
We started it at about 4:16, 4:17. So it's about an hour.
We didn't start at 4. I think it was.
No, it was 4:17.
No, I think it was 11. Don't give me this UK time. This thing is based in the United States, the good old United States. We're going to stick with US time. Okay, I got it. Now, the last thing, we are actually running out of time. IPKat. Tell me a little bit about what you think is the best thing about it, and if anything can get better.
The best thing about it is the purpose, which is to exchange information about IP from whatever jurisdiction, from whatever perspective, in an open manner. It's free. Nobody gets paid for it. People who write for it, whether it's, permanent staff or guests, they do it because they love IP. And that genders this completely open exchange of ideas and debate. So it's what Jeremy really wanted for IPKat, was to create a forum where ideas and different ways of doing things are communicated and shared in order to identify what might be the best way to do something, or the better way to do something. So that's really great. And in a time where, for really legitimate and good reasons, a lot of the IP resources are behind paywalls and you have to pay for it. It continues to be an open resource, particularly for students to be able to search and get the information that they need. So that's the best thing. What could be better is to get more input from other jurisdictions that have been neglected. We're good about doing the UK, main jurisdictions, IP jurisdictions in Europe and the US, but our readership is coming a lot more from Asia and from Africa. And we need to be, making sure that we are incorporating those cases and those stories as part of our exchange.
Okay. 5 years from now, how will it be dramatically different, the same, but just better, or what?
the world generally,
No, IPKat.
or oh, IPKat. I was like, we have another election to get through. I think it will be better. Each year we continue to improve, continue to find different ways to engage with our audience. I think we'll have new voices coming in, and new generation of IP lawyers coming in from other jurisdictions. So it will definitely get better. But everything can get better. Everything can improve. There's not any pinnacle of perfection. So every year we try to do that.
Okay, well, I was tempted there when you said the elections. I was going to ask what effect they will have on practice of law, but we could be on that maybe. I don't know.
Well, what they continue to have on the practice of law. Oh my goodness, yeah.
Well, in terms
But
of
what I will say about the elections, which I think is important, is that I think increasingly, what it has put into focus for a lot of lawyers, not just in the US, but across the world, including IP lawyers, is doing things that are a service, not just to IP in the profession, but a service to the community. So I'm seeing increasingly more IP lawyers to step away from, their IP work and take time out to do other things that are important for their communities. So that can only but be a good thing for the profession generally.
yeah, I agree. And on that upbeat note, I want to thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it, and I'm hoping that those who are watching or listening did as well. And so thank you very much.
Well,
Very
it
much
was a
appreciated.
privilege and an honor, Hugh, for being invited. I almost feel like it's too early in my career to have been invited to such an esteemed podcast, but thank you very much. I had a lot of fun.
And I had real doubts about bringing you, but now, as it turns out, I thought you were. I'm joking, of course, but I thought this was fantastic. I very much enjoyed it. So stay safe, and
thank you.
let's keep in touch.